Hello, 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 everyone. My name is Carmen Iezzi, and I serve as Executive Director of APSIA, the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs. We are so glad to see you here for the 2022 APSIA Diversity Forum Advisor Workshop. We have a great week of activities planned. APSIA, as some of you may know, is the association for all of the graduate schools around the world that specialize in international affairs and policy. And we're so delighted to bring you this week of different workshops and trainings and conversations and small group discussions and lots of ways for you to hopefully better come to understand the field and how you can bring these different opportunities and resources and perspectives to your students. Today, with this session, I'm going to do a very brief high-level look at careers in international affairs, and hopefully you'll be able to come to our complimentary session later today, where some of our alumni will be sharing their journeys and how they got into all of their different positions in the public sector, the private sector, the nonprofit sector, and beyond. Later this week, we're also going to have a session on helping you help students figure out what counts. We know students always are so worried about what they're able to do and how that's going to be looked at by employers. On Wednesday, we're going to be talking grad school, both a high-level look at some best practices you can share with your students in applying, as well as a chance for you to build some relationships and have some small group conversations with admissions directors from APSIA schools. Later on, we'll have a conversation among all of you, so you'll have a chance to talk and share best practices, particularly about bringing the local and the global together and what that can mean for you and your students and the many opportunities to connect those two pieces. We'll also have a session on access for those critical experiences like study abroad and internships and fellowships. And we'll have some leaders sharing some best practices in those pieces. And then finally on Friday, my team that I'll introduce in a minute, and I will be talking about how we can help you and what kinds of things APSIA can do to hopefully make your life and your lift a little easier. I want to thank my amazing team, especially Brittany Truer and Brianna Suarez and Melina Perez for all of their very, very hard work to put this workshops together. I'm so grateful for all of the wonderful things that they do for us and for you to hopefully broaden this universe of students and community that we have. I'm also extremely grateful to the investors in our diversity forum, in particular, Johns Hopkins SAIS, the Open Society Foundations, Princeton University's School of Public and International Affairs, Robertson Foundation for Government, Texas A&M's Bush School, USC's Master of Public Diplomacy program, and the University of Washington Jackson School. They and all of our investors make these sessions possible. And so we're so glad to bring this to you and to your communities to the best of our ability. So I'm going to jump in and again, give a high level look, and then we'll have time for Q&A and a chance to talk a little bit more through these things. And then our alum later today will share some of their journeys and opportunities and challenges that they've faced. This session is based on a standard presentation that we do for you and your students. So if you are interested in this presentation, you can request a free, completely free presentation like this and builds out a little bit more for the students. But we know that some of the things that we were going to share with students, you all already know, like best practices and letters of recommendation and all that good stuff. Can I get a thumbs up if folks can see my screen? Hopefully. Thank you so much. All right, so let's jump in. As we go through, if you have questions, I see that there's already some good stuff going on in the chat. I will do my best to reply to it, or my team will. So please keep those questions coming, and we'll have a chance for broader conversation in a little bit. So when folks talk about international affairs, there's a lot of well-known pathways, opportunities in diplomacy, like the State Department, or defense and security, or in development. But we know that the field of international affairs is enormous. By design, we are an interdisciplinary field, and you all know that that means we weave together business and trade and language and culture, politics and history and all of these different components. And that's what makes the opportunities so broad, as well as the field so flexible to let students do lots of different kinds of things. So there may be opportunities for your students who are thinking about how science and technology has an international component to it. Energy and the environment, climate change, business, trade, communications, education, human rights, security, all of these pieces have an international affairs component to them. and our students go and succeed in all of these different sectors. About 44% of APSIA graduates will go into the private sector in some way. Another 30 or so percent will end up in the government, whether that's local, national, or federal, or in their home countries. And then another 30 or so percent will end up in the nonprofit sector, broadly defined. And then about 5 or 10% immediately out of graduate school will go into what we call the multilateral organizations. So that might be the UN, the World Bank, the IMF. I know many of your students are often interested in those pathways. And what we've found is that typically an entry-level job in those areas is a master's plus 3 to 5. So we can talk about how you help students think about that as a longer term plan, perhaps not something that happens at the ripe age of 20 when they're a little earlier in their careers. How might you know if a student is a good fit for this field? You might hear them talk about how they want to work on big problems, poverty, climate change. I think disease, global health is something very much on everybody's mind these days. Maybe that's where they want to put their professional energy in their professional life. Maybe they feel this broader call to service, and perhaps that's just part of the ethos on your campus or something that an individual student brings to you. And that's how they want to use their professional time, not necessarily in a direct service way, but through these broader issues, although we have a lot of direct service opportunities as well. You might have students who are just curious about the world. They want to travel, they want to experience different cultures, they love languages, or they come already with a multitude of languages, and they want to use that as part of their professional toolkit. And obviously there's lots of opportunities in the international affairs space for those kind of students. Maybe they've seen how policy decisions in your state capital, in DC, in other parts of the world, influence their everyday lives. And I think the pandemic in particular has really shown the way that different policy choices really shape and change how people live their everyday lives. And maybe they want to either be one of those decision makers and be seated at the table, or supporting those people and make sure that different voices are heard when decisions get taken. So that's how they want to use their professional life. That's how they want to contribute. Maybe they're like me and they just like to argue. They love that back and forth, and they like to believe that they're totally going to change somebody else's mind, or maybe occasionally have their perspective changed in a different way. And that's how they want to use that energy. They want to use those skills. They're good at public communication and public speaking. And that's how they want to use their life. And even if they don't know any of those things, maybe they just feel this deep-seated need to be part of something bigger, to be part of some kind of social change. I see that a lot in students these days. They don't necessarily know how or why or where, but they want to be a part of the solution. And there's lots of different possibilities for students in our space to do that, again, on the local, on the national, and on the global level. We also often see students who are worried that they don't have the right major or they don't have the right background. Because we are an interdisciplinary space, lots of different perspectives, lots of different undergraduate majors feed into the work that goes on in international affairs. So maybe you have a student who's studying computer science, and they want to couple that with a global understanding or with a policy understanding, and they want to work on questions of cybersecurity. That might be offensive, bringing the fight to other countries in a cyberspace. Perhaps it's defensive, protecting a company, protecting a nonprofit. The International Red Cross just had a major cybersecurity crisis, and they need cybersecurity professionals at this time, but ones who understand what the international landscape looks like. So there's opportunities there, even for that student who may not think of themselves as naturally inclined in an international affairs way, to have a lot of opportunities. Maybe you have students who write really well and they're interested in journalism, and they want to couple that with a particular part of the world, whether it's as a human rights monitor, whether it's telling the story on the ground in person. We have lots of journalists, whether it's Wolf Blitzer, who's an APSIA alum, or everyday independent journalists, who are just using the combination of those skills, an understanding of the world and the forces at work in the world, and an understanding of writing and communications and journalism to tell those stories and to put those pieces out into space. It might be environmental science, it could be history, lots and lots of different possibilities. And before folks frantically take notes, I will say all of these slides will be available afterwards. So if you want to revisit this list, or if you'd like to talk through any of the components on this list, we'll be able to share this with you afterwards. But the overall thought is there's lots of different majors. Sometimes I get students who say, but I'm not political science, I'm not international affairs. And to that I say, Great, we have plenty of those. We need all of those different perspectives. We want all of those different backgrounds in classrooms, in the field, to help make the work that much better. So whether students are called to cybersecurity or journalism or economics or any of those pieces, what kinds of things might they need? And as I mentioned earlier, we think about the field as sort of 4 big buckets of careers. Private sector, for-profit companies. Lots of our students go work for Facebook, they go work for the Walt Disney Company, they go work for banks, they go work for defense contractors, lots of different things. They go work for food companies and all sorts of different areas in the private sector. The other bucket we think of is the public sector. As I said, local governments, national governments, global governments, federal governments in lots of different areas. You'll hear today later from one of our colleagues at the US Department of Agriculture. We have folks who are at the General Accountability Office, as well as some of the well-known places like the State Department, USAID, the Department of Defense, Treasury, all of those kinds of areas. We have lots of students who go into the nonprofit sector, broadly defined, could be a university, could be a direct service agency, could be a think tank. And then, as I said, a lot of students who go into the multilateral sector. But I would argue that the skills you see on the screen are 5 things that everybody needs, no matter which of those places they think they're going to end up. So as you know well, and I'm sure as you advise them regularly, some professional experience. And we can talk about the many ways they can access internships, on-job opportunities, all of those kinds of things that just talk to them about how to behave in a workplace, how to be a part of a team, how to just navigate the professional environment. Ideally, it might have some cross-cultural or international element to it. And as I said, we'll talk later this week about ways that students can take those professional experiences that they may not think count as international affairs and reframe that or tell their story in an effective way. But the more you can encourage them to see what an office is like through their work study, through internships, I think the stronger their portfolio can be. They need to know how to take all the knowledge that's in their head and get it out clearly in a spoken manner as well as in a written form. And unfortunately, that's not necessarily the 80-page papers that their faculty may be assigning them to write. It's taking all of that knowledge that's in an 80-page paper and conveying it in a page and a half. So for those of you in particular, maybe on the career side or on the fellowship side, having them sharpen the ability to take that 80-page paper and convey that same amount of knowledge in a page and a half, memo writing workshops, exercises to work with faculty, to sharpen and tighten those skills are very effective. Also getting them to practice, presenting all of that information to lots of different kinds of audiences, having them speak to their peers, having them speak to faculty. The more comfortable they can get conveying knowledge, the better armed they will be as they go into the professional space. Obviously, if they're able to do that in a language other than their native language, all the better. But at a minimum, being able to convey all that information clearly and concisely is so critical. In a similar way, the ability to unpack and understand what information tells them. For some of them, it's going to be more mathematically, quantitatively inclined, but for all of them, being able to look at a situation, to understand what the data tells them, to know what works about a situation, to know what needs fixing, and then to be able to convey all of that in a clear and concise manner. So the analytical skills, the more you can get them to practice looking at and monitoring a situation, evaluating it, and then learning from that experience, the better. Some of them, again, it might be on the technical side, and we can talk about some of the programs that are in demand, but for all of them, that analytical capability, the ability to do critical thinking is so very, very important, regardless of what sector they're going to end up in. On the fourth thing that I would say, I talk about it as project management, but really what I mean is, can they take the idea that's in their head and make it a reality? You'll see this in clubs. We want to do this event. Okay, how do I marshal the human resources, the financial resources, the time, the money, all of that to make this thing possible? They can think about the work they do in their faith community. They can think about the work they do as interns or as work studies. All of those different pieces can showcase their project management skills. It might also be something like putting together a fellowship application. Can they marshal the letters of recommendation, the essays, the time management, all of those pieces to be sure that it gets in on time in the way that needs to happen? And then finally, who is the network around them? It will be you all, it will be their peers, it will be alumni of your organizations, it will be other young leaders and young professionals. But we use this term networking all the time, and we know that it scares them, but really stressing to them that it's about the relationship management, thinking about who can inform their choices, not just every day, as they steer their life, but, oh, okay, I need to figure out, how do I reach out to this person? How do I effectively use LinkedIn? How do I effectively use the tools and the relationships that I have to build out my understanding of the world, to build out my understanding of what opportunities are possible? I've talked a little bit about some of the ways they can get these kinds of pieces, but I'm not naive. I know we're in the middle of a very unusual moment in global time. So some of those traditional avenues may not be open and available. And in some ways, maybe they were never open and available to students. Luckily, the pandemic has brought about a big uptick in the number of remote internships. There are a lot of organizations who used to be tied to one particular desk in one particular city in one particular place, who are now open to interns and opportunities worldwide. And one of the things, now that you're part of the advisor network here at APSIA, we share lots of different opportunities through our listservs, and lots of different possibilities are posted on our website. We also work sometimes with partners like the UN Volunteer Corps that has online and remote projects and opportunities. The Humanitarian Mapping Project, MapGive, all of these different ways for students to use the skills they have to gain access to professional development in their jammies, from their dorm room, or wherever they happen to find themselves. There's also a lot going on locally in your community that they can tap into. And as I said, we'll have a conversation later this week for you all to bounce ideas off of each other and have a great group share. But again, lots of possibilities. It could be the International Student Services Office on your campus. Oftentimes it's the local police force that might be working to combat human trafficking or work on different issues of privilege and access. It might be the local hospital that's looking for language translators or people with cross-cultural expertise to help support their work with patients. Lots of things going on. Oftentimes it's the local export board, people who are trying to support small business development and work with local businesses in your community to get them ready to export to other places. So lots of different connections that can happen locally that give the students opportunity to access these global skills. Even if none of that is possible, they can write on blogs, they can get their work published in many of the undergraduate journals that exist. They can work with faculty to unpack those issues, to sharpen their quantitative skills, to sharpen their analytical skills. Sometimes they can even get paid for it. Lots of freelance projects exist where a student might wrap their hands around one specific issue for a certain period of time and get paid for it. Or they take on a contract project where it's not one project, but it's a certain number of months or a certain number of weeks. And oftentimes there is financial compensation for that as well. And we can talk about where they can find those kinds of opportunities, but all of this they can do regardless of their ability to travel, regardless necessarily of their financial resources in-house, regardless of what state the weird pandemic is in, but all of these are different possibilities. They can also build out their network. There's so many community groups that have moved online because of the pandemic. Some of them quite broad, like young professionals in foreign policy, others quite specific, like women of color advancing peace and security. So whether the students are interested in big questions and lots of different kinds of possibilities, or they meet those more niche possibilities like peace and security, there's different ways for them to connect with folks all around the world, all around the country who share those interests and build out their personal and their professional network that way. We have lots of tools and resources that we are delighted to share with all of you completely free of charge. And when we open up the conversation, if there's anything in particular that you're curious about, whether it exists or whether we're planning to build it, please ask those kind of things. But I did want to share some of the links that we already have. We have a whole career guide on our website that talks about some of those different sectors, suggests employers and offers some tips. All of the job and internship openings that we know about get posted on our jobs board, lots of remote internships there, different entry-level jobs, all the way up to faculty positions and staff positions at APSIA schools. We have a download through what we call the Public and International Service Advisor Network, the PISA network, that you can pull down and hand out to your students or print out and have available, that has little descriptions of each of those big categories that I talked about. And then we tell lots of stories, all about the different things that our alumni do, what they get up to. So when students come in and they truly just don't know where to start, you can point them in that direction and they can say, oh, I read about this person. She sounds really cool. I kind of like a job like that. Or I read about that and that sounds terrible. I have no interest in going that direction. So it might give them some food for thought as they think about different things. We're also as active as we can be on social media. So again, lots of storytelling, lots of internships, lots of job opportunities. And then we will deliver for you all throughout the week, throughout the years coming up, many different possibilities of what's possible. So with that, I know we have about 10 minutes left before we conclude this part of our kickoff part of the week. So I'm curious, what can I answer for you? What do students ask you? What are the most common things that you're curious about? How can we be of assistance and get everybody started and off to a great Diversity Forum Advisor Week? All right. One of the most common questions I get too, would folks find some of the links that I mentioned, things like MapGive, things like the Humanitarian Street Project, would those links be helpful in the chat? Megan says her students ask all the time what they can do with careers in this major. Excellent, Megan. We know the field is enormous. Oh, I saw somebody was there. All right, I will throw some. So MapGive, the Humanitarian, helps if I can spell. Some of the other remote internships, so UN Volunteer Corps, online has opportunities. Other questions that you all get all the time that you're wondering about, things that students ask you. Let's see if I can type. One of the other key things that I would encourage you to encourage your students to do, whether it's through their internships or their work study, is to encourage them to really think about their letters of recommendation. So how they stay in touch with those advisors, how they stay in touch with their supervisors in all of these different organizations. We often find that students have a really great experience and then they never talk to those folks again until they need that letter of rec. So giving them some strategies, and again, I'm happy to talk through this with you all, giving them some tools to say, this is a relationship you need to maintain. This is something you need to stay in touch with. Moira asks if students are looking for summer service opportunities. Do I have any thoughts? Absolutely. So there are a number of internships that will be remote this summer. Another great place, depending on the student, is the Atlas Corps, and Global Health Corps is another one that comes up sometimes in the summer. Global Health Corps is an international opportunity, so some of their work has been compromised or complicated by the pandemic. Atlas Corps also does a lot of good work to help students find, particularly around social entrepreneurship opportunities. Depending on where your students are, there are different organizations that host younger students. So they might be working with high school students and they need undergraduates to serve as counselors and advisors. So places like Learn, Serve International and the World Affairs Councils of America. Many of your towns and communities might have a World Affairs Council that are sponsoring summer workshops, and they need undergraduate students to support their work with high school students and even elementary school students. So it's a way for the students to reach back a little bit in the pipeline, but these are great summer professional development opportunities for your students in particular. Also, Moira, you threw me. I'm trying to think of different summer. Oh, also American Councils for Education, international education, particularly if you have students with really good language skills. American Council sponsors a lot of summer programming overseas, Korea, Japan, Mongolia, Jordan, lots of different places, and they need just short-term summer counselors. So this would be a chance for your students to go get some international experience just for the summer, use their language skills, working with locals on the ground. So it also builds those professional competencies while getting paid for it and getting that chance to do some international overseas work. The other thing that's coming up, although the opportunity itself won't be in the summer, is the virtual federal student federal service, the VSFS. They have their big Apply in July campaign. These are remote internships with federal agencies. It was started by the State Department, so usually you'll see it pitched as the virtual student foreign service, but it's not. It's much broader than just the State Department. Lots of opportunities for students to do unclassified work with the federal government, and they'll have their Apply in July campaign for opportunities to start in the fall. We usually invite the VSFS to come brief all of our advisors. So as soon as we get that particular date on the books, we'll get them to be able to come talk about how students put together a competitive application. They usually also share with us some of the opportunities that are under applied, so students can boost their competitiveness by zeroing in on those different possibilities as well. So that's, I know we're almost at time, but we'll have lots more content for you all. Later today at 4 o'clock is our alumni panel who are going to talk about their journeys and unpack for you all some of those things that I talked about at a high level, what it means to work for the federal government on questions of agriculture and trade and working with farmers and supporting that kind of work, what it means to work for YouTube and do their diversity and inclusion and environmental work in the private sector, what it means to work in a nonprofit on questions of peace and security, as well as whatever other great issues you'd like to bring before them. So this is just the beginning of what we know is going to be a great week of content for all of you. Again, my slides will be available shortly through my colleague, Brittany Fjord. And we look forward to seeing you at lots of other APSIA opportunities throughout this week and to staying in touch far beyond this. I'm going to throw my email in the chat as well if folks have any direct questions for me. And we also had in the chat the opportunity for you to request a presentation like this for your students, which we are absolutely happy to do spring, summer, fall, whenever we can do it. So thank you all so much, and we'll see you in a couple hours.